You cannot learn from what somebody has done in the past, because what the guy did in the past was true of his time and his conditions. But the conditions and time that you are in could require a very different kind of strategies. And those cannot be done by just looking at the past.
Welcome to VALYOU, a podcast where gurus from Global Gyan Academy help you create competitive advantage in your career. Learn how you can win in the future of work and uniquely design your career from those who have succeeded and failed at it. Now here's your host, Srinivasa Adyapalli from Mumbai.
In the previous episode, we looked at the skills that every professional must build to future-proof one's career. Remember the 4 skills? Build your identity, learn to sell, learn to code, understand money and wealth. And now, the 5th skill. The skill that is so critical that I wanted to dedicate a full episode for it. The skill is critical thinking. And in order to understand this critical skill, I spoke with my teacher and mentor, Dr. Ashok Korwar. Dr. Korwar was a professor of strategy at the Indian Institute of Management, IIM Ahmedabad, during the 90s. For the past 20 years, he has been consulting with and coaching leaders of high-growth companies. Sir, it's a pleasure to have you on this podcast. Let me begin by asking you to explain to us what is critical thinking and why is it important for all of us?
I think critical thinking is so important nowadays for a number of reasons. One of them really is there's so much fake news around, for one thing. People are saying things which are patently not true, and yet people are believing them. Why? Because if a lie is told often enough, it becomes believable. So these are some of the things that are happening out there in the real world. Whether it is young people or older people, everybody is being taken in, or at least they just don't have the ability to discriminate between what is real and what is not real. So we need to have the ability to distinguish between things that are obviously false and things which could be true, and look for the pointers which would tell us whether it is possibly true or not. This is one. There's lots of other reasons why. A related reason is too much data. There's data now on everything. Yesterday, for instance, I was looking at a review of some 200 accounts at one of my clients, and any amount of data you want, you can get. But what are you supposed to do with it? Every account, I got data on what is the revenue, what is the profit, who is the customer, what is he doing, what is the technology. But what do I do with it? What are the insights that I can get from it? It's something that is very hard to do. And if managers don't have that, all this data is just going to flood them and inundate them, and they will not be able to do anything with it. But to be able to do that, you have to be able to ask the right questions and say, okay, what are the things that this data could tell me? What are the questions I need to ask the data? What are the things, the patterns that I look for? How does one see that it is a pattern and not just something that I made up on the spot? So these are some of the things that people need.
Could you give an example? Does it apply just to leaders or for all of us? Say a young manager. How is critical thinking important?
If you're a young person who's been doing his first job, let's say, and you're sent out into the field to manage, let's say, a distributor, and you find the data tells you that distributor sales are going down. That's the data. Now you need to figure out, why is it going down? Is it because the guy is a crook? There are people who will tell you that this guy is a crook anyway, and he sells things from the side of his shop or whatever and doesn't report the sales and pockets the rest. These are something that people will tell you. Or if you talk to the guy himself, he'll tell you it's because there's a recession. He'll tell you it's because millennials don't buy these things. That's the favorite thing now, right? To blame millennials for everything. So how do you make out which of these is true? How do you make out what is true and what is false? What is 80% true and 20% false? To be able to do that, you need critical thinking. And critical thinking in this context really means being able to distinguish between what is true and what is not true. What is actually happening, what is not happening. What are people just saying because they want to submerge the truth in a flood of nonsense? Or is it because, it is really true?
Is there any other aspect of critical thinking that comes to your mind?
What is happening today is people are so focused and so specialized that they know only one thing. So for instance, if you know one thing very well, your field very well, you may not be able to appreciate the value that another field brings in. So your ability to understand learnings from some other field, which used to be so important in the days of the Renaissance men, those who were architects and engineers and poets and musicians all at the same time. They could actually apply lessons from one field into another field and get somewhere. But today people are so focused that you're a PhD in one thing and you really are not able to apply that to or get learnings from some other field into your field. Critical thinking also includes this, I think, the ability to learn from other fields. The standard story that I always tell, which is again a very academic story, but all of you would know that there is a price for the put option, right? There's a formula called the Black-Scholes model. It was a very esoteric, difficult thing to do, but the way it was solved is because the guy who did it was a physicist. He was not a finance guy. And when he saw this equation that represents the pricing of a call option, he could recognize that it is the same equation as the flow of heat along a bar, the solution to which had been known for 100 years. But the economists and finance profession had been struggling with it for years. But he looked at it and he said, I know what this is. I know how to solve this. In fact, there are many such examples today where people have won Nobel Prizes by actually applying something which was known in another field into a field that they are working in. If you can do that, then that is, of course, a way to win a Nobel Prize, if nothing else. So that is certainly something worth doing. So critical thinking, I think, consists of these three different things. One is ability to tell what is true and what is not true. Ability to distinguish between propaganda and truth. Another is the ability to get patterns out of data. And the third really is the ability to transfer learnings across boundaries. If you're able to do that, then I think it is a very good thing to be able to do. And unfortunately, our education system doesn't teach any of these things. Our education system does not tell us how to transfer learnings from physics to economics, for instance. Very few people actually know both physics and economics. But your ability to do that is what will make you a pathbreaker. And nobody teaches you that. Somehow, these are things that today you have to learn for yourself somehow, or God knows what. But these are very critical things for the future of anybody.
There is also one issue about learning in general, and it's true for management learning in particular, is that we often learn a lot from the past.
Right.
And the people who teach us from experience.
Right.
And how does that therefore impact the ability to think, because we don't act in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. So you look at the strategy of some company and say this is great, and then you'll think this is what every company should do, but it is not so, because conditions are different, competitive forces are different, and the strategies that companies need to apply, you cannot learn from what somebody has done in the past, because what the guy did in the past was true of his time and his conditions. But the conditions and time that you are in could require a very different kind of strategies. And those cannot be done by just looking at the past. What you have to be able to do is you have to be able to look at the past, identify the main ingredients of that, and see which of them apply to your situation. Now that is critical thinking, to be able to do that. If you can do that, then you can come up with new strategies which are based in some sense on the past, because the learnings are there, but they are not just replicating what the past has done. So if you want to be Steve Jobs, well, you can't be Steve Jobs, right? Steve Jobs, there was only one and he's done it. Now, what are the things that he did that you can now apply to the situation you are in? That would be good.
Why do you think, apart from the education system itself, why do you think people don't pay enough attention to critical thinking or building the skill? Why isn't this a very popular learning program across colleges or even corporates?
Well, I think the reason is, of course, that we are so tuned to thinking that knowledge is important. We are not trained to value understanding. We are trained to value knowledge. Knowledge means knowing the facts. But doing something with the facts is going beyond that. And that is something that we have not typically valued. In this country at least. Maybe other educational systems they do. But in India at least we have not valued that so much. Today people still boast about the fact that they know the Bhagavad Gita backwards or something. Now what good is that if you don't apply the Bhagavad Gita in your life, right? It's of no value. But there are people who know it. But that's not the only reason. I think the other reason is that some of the things we talked about require even the teacher to be able to think like this. And I don't think many people are capable of doing that, or at least capable of teaching other people to do it. because it does require a great deal of very careful thinking. How do you teach this kind of thing? And very often the time that you spend doing it will be wasted. Because if you want to, for instance, teach an economist to apply physics, what do? You tell him to go learn physics? No, that doesn't work, no? Because he will spend half his life learning physics and he will get nothing out of it. So it's very difficult to actually be sure that learning different things is going to help you. You have to do it just because you're interested in doing it anyway. And your mind works like that. If your mind works like that and you value it, then critical thinking can happen. But it's very difficult to teach that. It is not something that we can expect our normal educational system to do.
When you think about the importance of critical thinking, we can see that it's being talked about a lot more nowadays. People are mentioning about this. Right. Do you see at least the recognition of this gap has changed and increased in the last, say, 10, 20 years? And if so, why?
Yes, it certainly has increased. And I do hear all my clients talking about it and requiring it as something that we teach in our leadership development programs and so on. So it has increased. And I think the reason it has increased is because we have begun to realize that we live in very uncertain times. And set strategies simply don't work. Set piece strategies. So we have to be able to live in a world with all kinds of data flowing around us, where things are changing all the time. And ability to adjust to that is very important. And I think everybody now in every company, every organization values that. And critical thinking is an important part of that. If you can do that well, then you'll be able to adjust very quickly as well, because you'll be able to discern what is important and what is not and move quickly. So that I think people have begun to realize the value of.
If there was one quick tip that you would give, I know it's not easy to convert such a complex topic into quick tips, but if there's one thing that any professional could do to start this journey of building critical thinking, what would you suggest?
I would say the single one thing everyone needs to do is whenever they're asked or they're thinking about doing something, ask why. Why is this important? Why should we do this? If you keep asking why deeply enough, profoundly enough, and seriously enough, it will lead to critical thinking. So I would say this is the one thing that we need to learn to do is ask why. Somebody tells you something is happening, ask why. Somebody tells you this is true, ask why. Somebody tells you this is the way to go, ask why. And if you do that often enough, and as a matter of routine, then critical thinking can happen.
And I guess not just ask why, but seek the answer.
Seek the answer. Follow it up. Right. Not just ask.
Because a lot of people ask the question but don't do anything about it.
Or you ask it just to push it back into the other guy's face, which is not what we are looking for.
Thank you very much, Professor, for sharing your thoughts on critical thinking. We will continue this conversation into the next episode. So that rounds up the 5 skills that are necessary for every professional to future-proof your career. Develop critical thinking, build your identity, learn to sell, learn to code, understand money and wealth. Hari sent me a WhatsApp message asking to elaborate on some of these skills. In future episodes, we will surely deep dive into these skills as well as explore more stories on how we can build competitive advantage in career. Do share your comments, questions and feedback. Our contact details are in the show notes. Till next time, see you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of VALYOU. Visit our website globalgyan.in and subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode. You can also download the Global Gyan app to get additional content, learning and mentoring by the gurus at Global Gyan. Do tune in to our next episode.